Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you gonna see, what if Naruto was betrayed and killed by villagers and reborn with dragon. This is part 1. And if you want more, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's getting the video, and do check out the author of the story. Life sucks. These words can be taken up by one Naruto Uzumaki as he fought against his best friend at the Valley of the End. Naruto's life had pretty much sucked ever since he was born. When he was born, a massive 9-tailed fox attacked and was sealed inside his stomach by the 4th Hokage. Sadly, the villagers needed something to vent their anger on. The result was Naruto's tortured childhood. He was given overpriced rotten food to eat, had little to no friends, and was treated like a leper. There were days, specifically his birthday, when people got rowdy. That tends to happen when people get drunk. Thankfully, at that point, Naruto was pretty good at hiding. In the Ninja Academy, Naruto's life didn't improve. He made little to no friends because of his status as a pariah. On top of that, the many teachers would sabotage his work, so he became known as the class idiot and was the dead last of his year. While some teachers didn't sabotage him, the Jinchuriki thing did work against him by giving him more chakra than the average genin at his age. As a result, Naruto had trouble doing simple techniques like clones, substitutions, and transformations. As a result, he was labeled a lost cause since the teachers didn't want to put in the extra work. Naruto also had to play the part of an idiot because it helped keep the villagers off his back, especially the shinobi. Naruto had contemplated leaving, but he couldn't. He had nowhere to go. He had no family to speak of, alive or dead, and he had a feeling that once he stepped foot outside the village, without a guide, there would be a massive fox hunt. He managed to graduate, after 3 failures, by mastering an A-ranked technique called the Shadow Clones, which he could use with extreme ease, and beat the tar out of a traitor to the village. After graduating, he was put with the Rookie of the Year, Sasuke Uchiha, and his #1 fangirl, Sakura Haruno. Their sensei was Kakashi Hitaki, a perverted jonin who spent most of his time reading smut. Their first test resulted in Naruto being tied to a post, even though Sakura did nothing the entire test but hide. Right away, Naruto realized Kakashi was just like the rest of the villagers. He hated him for the Kyuubi and did his best to sabotage Naruto by refusing to train him. He focused all his time on Sasuke training the arrogant emo prince. He did the same in the Chunin exams, saying Sasuke needed him more because he was fighting a psychopath named Gaara. Naruto in the meantime had to fight Neji Hyuga, who had no problems nearly killing his own cousin. With the help of the self-proclaimed super pervert, Jiraiya, Naruto learned summoning. He beat Neji and would later beat Gaara by summoning the Toad boss, Gamabunta. Later, Naruto would learn another A-rank technique called the Rasengan and save the life of one Tsunade Senju, who was going to be the 5th Hokage. Despite all this, nothing changed. The villagers all passed on Naruto's accomplishments to Sasuke because they didn't want to believe that the demon could actually do something incredible. Now, Sasuke, who believed Konoha was holding him back, had decided to ditch the village for Orochimaru, one of the village's greatest traitors. Naruto and some of the other rookies, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba and Akamaru, and Neji had all been chosen to retrieve him. The team had beaten all their opponents with the help of 3 Suna shinobi. Now Naruto stood off against his fellow genin in a fight that would decide. Sasuke had activated a curse seal he had on his neck and had gone into a second state that turned his skin gray, his hair purple, gave him a black mark on the bridge of his nose, and turned the sclera of his eyes black. Naruto was currently wrapped up in a cloak given by the use of the Kyuubi's chakra. He had a large fox tail and 2 large fox-like ears on his head formed by the cloak. The two glared at each other across the way of the 2 statues of the Valley of the End. Naruto formed a large spiraling ball of chakra in on hand while Sasuke gripped what like a ball of lightning. The two launched at each other. Rasengan, Chidori. The two clashed with a loud bang. A massive black orb formed in the middle of the waterfall and there was a loud explosion. When the smoke faded, it showed Naruto and Sasuke lying down on the ground. Obviously, the fight had taken a lot out of them. Meanwhile, a man in jonin attire with gravity-defying silver hair, a headband slanted over one eye and a face mask saw the whole thing. With him was a mall brown pug that had a darker brown snout, ears, He had a blue vest that had a seal on the back and a headband like Naruto's and the silver-haired man. "Well, what do you know?" the pug said in a deep gruff voice that was very deceptive for his cute appearance. The kid actually won. "Well, it looks like you won't need me anymore, Kakashi. See you later." The pug vanished in a puff of smoke. Kakashi stood up and clenched his fist. He had seen the jutsu Naruto had used. How dare the dead last use one of the two jutsus that the Yondaime, his sensei, used? How dare this demon pervert one of the jutsu that made his sensei famous? Kakashi walked forward and leaned down next to Sasuke and began to heal him using a medical jutsu that he had copied. After a moment, Sasuke began to stir. Sasuke rose up with a pained look on his face. "What happened?" the Uchiha asked. Then he remembered and turned to glare at the unconscious blonde next to him. "Easy, Sasuke," Kakashi said, as he walked towards Naruto and started to pick him up. The movement woke Naruto, who stirred slightly. "Sensei?" Naruto asked, as he saw the familiar hair. What are you doing?" Kakashi answered, "This is for the best, Naruto. Sasuke is going to kill you and rid the world of the Kyuubi. At the same time, he is going to gain the next phase of his Sharingan, the Mangekyo, and return to Konoha." Naruto's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." Kakashi simply lifted Naruto up and said, "Oh, I am. And I'm sure the Godem will give him some leeway when she hears of how he had to kill you because you had lost control of the Kyuubi's chakra and went on a rampage." Naruto tried to get away from Kakashi, only to feel a seal get pressed onto his back. He could feel the Kyuubi's chakra stop healing him and the pain returned from his shoulder wound. Sasuke, having heard Kakashi's words, smirked. With this he would be able to get one step closer to avenging his clan. Not only that, but he couldn't let it get out that the dead last had defeated him. Naruto was at the bottom of the totem pole for a reason. The sound of chirping birds reached Naruto's ears as he saw the Chidori active on Sasuke's hand. The Uchiha had that same infuriating smirk on his face. "You should be happy, Dobi," Sasuke said. "With your death, you will be helping me get one step closer to being able to kill my brother. You should be glad you'll be of use to a great clan such as mine." With that, Sasuke pulled the attack back and shoved it through Naruto's chest. The whiskered blonde coughed up blood as the attack shredded his lung and nicked his heart, causing it to bleed. Sasuke had a triumphant grin on his face. It fell when he realized something. He didn't feel any stronger. He didn't feel any rush of strength, nor did his Sharingan field change. What happened? He was supposed to get stronger with Naruto's death. That's what Kakashi just said. Naruto's pained chuckling reached his ears. Sasuke glared at Naruto, who was just laughing. "You actually think I thought you were my friend?" Naruto rasped. "An arrogant prick like you? I tolerated you, Sasuke. When I'm dead you'll gain nothing. You lose." He then turned to Kakashi and said, "Congrats, sensei. It looks like you are just as much trash as this duck-haired bastard. When you die, I'll be waiting." With that last word, and a smirk that infuriated Kakashi, the light left Naruto's eyes. The young ninja had died. Sasuke growled in anger as he was denied the power he so rightly deserved. It was necessary to end his brother and finally avenge his clan. The boy went through hand signs and yelled, "Fire release! Great fireball technique!" Sasuke only released a few sparks as he found that he had too little chakra left after the battle. The strain of using the level 2 curse seal hitting him like a runaway cabbage cart. The boy then pitched over and fell right next to the now dead blonde. Kakashi sighed as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a blank scroll. He removed the suppression seal he placed on high, before sealing away Naruto's body in it and sheathed it on his belt. While he hated doing so, he didn't want to risk Orochimaru getting his scaly mitts on Naruto's body, especially if any of the Kyuubi's chakra was still left in Naruto's body. He then picked up Sasuke and headed back to Konoha. He looked up as clouds began to gather in the sky before rain began to fall. Kakashi looked up, believing that the heavens were crying with joy at the destruction of the nine-tailed beast. "Finally, you can rest in peace, sensei." Unknowingly, Kakashi and Sasuke's actions had just started Konoha's death clock. In a high plane of existence. Damn. That silver-haired bastard. The image of Naruto being killed and burned was seen in a mirror. The mirror was on the wall of a very extravagant-looking room. In the room were several individuals. The one who yelled was a woman with long red hair and purple eyes wearing Jonin garb. Though you couldn't tell her eyes were purple because she had an epic scary face on as she radiated crimson energy. While her hair waved around like octopus tentacles, her face completely shadowed with only round white circles in place of her eyes. The second was a man with spiky blonde hair with 2 long sideburns running down the sides of his face. He wore a Jonin-like attire under a long white trench coat with the words Yellow Flash written on the back with red flames imprinted on the bottom. The third was a man long brown hair cut short on top with 2 locks wrapped in bandages framing either side of his face. His eyebrows were cut short and his eyes had blue marking around them, which were turned up in the corners. He wore a high-collared, light-colored kimono held closed by a dark sash. On the collar were several magatama decorating it. Under the kimono was a full-bodied suit. The fourth had short, spiky brown hair, with 2 locks wrapped in bandages and framing either side of his face. He wore a headband with a metal plate replacing the ninja headband only without the symbol. He wore the same outfit as the other man. The fifth was a tall and pale-skinned man with deep wrinkles. He had spiky, shoulder-length, pale red hair, with a chin-length braid hanging fin front of his left ear. He had a long beard. He also had 2 horn-like protrusions on his head. He had purple eyes with a black dot as a pupil and ring-like pattern around it and a red marking that in the middle of his forehead. If you looked at his palms you would see a light-colored circle on his right palm, and a dark-colored moon on his left. The sixth was a tall man with featureless white eyes and horn-like protrusions on his forehead. He had no eyebrows and long light-colored hair with bangs combed to the left, and a single chin-length lock that hung from the right side of his face. He wore a light, full-length kimono with a pattern of 6 black magatama around the collar and dark pants. He had a sword strapped to his left hip and a dark crescent moon on his left palm. In order they were Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, Minato Namikaze, Indra Otsutsuki, Asura Otsutsuki, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, and Hamura Otsutsuki. As mad as they were, there were 3 people who seemed angrier. The first was a woman with beautiful tanned skin. Her tanned skin was a contrast to her long snow-white hair. Her golden eyes were filled with anger. Her curvaceous body was covered by a pure white battle dress with a window cut out that showed off some of her chest and cleavage. Her dress ran down to her ankles. Her feet were covered with white boots that went up to her calves. The second was just as curvy as the first. In contrast, her skin was pale and hair was pitch black and done up in pigtails. She had bright purple eyes. Her attire consisted of a black corset with dark purple highlights down the center. Her lower half was covered by a skirt that went to her knees and was a little loose. Her feet were covered with black boots. In her hands was a black staff with a large double-bladed scythe that had the kanji for hell on one end and the kanji for heaven on the other. The third woman was also curvy. She had short green hair that went down to her neck. Her eyes were a deep brown color. She wore a deep green top that revealed her cleavage and her midriff. Lower half was covered by tight pants and what looked like hiking boots. Over her top was a brown leather jacket that had the image of vines wrapping around her arms. In order they were Kami, Shinigami, and Tozi. Damn humans, Shinigami said. Do they really believe that Naruto is a demon? Do they have such little faith in their leader and my power? Kami reached out and said, calm down sis. There is no need to go crazy. At least not yet. Tozi nodded and said, yes, there are other matters we must focus on. I told you that you shouldn't have sealed the fox into Naruto. I told you. The 3 goddesses turned to see Kushina was tearing into Minato furiously even though she had been doing so since the day that they died. I know, I screwed up. Minato yelled back at his wife, don't you think I feel bad enough about what has happened to our child? Kushina yelled, no. Hagoromo shook his head and asked, how far the world has fallen. If Tobirama and Hashirama were here no doubt they would weep at how far their beloved village has fallen. Hamura nodded and said, I must agree brother. The ninja world has fallen into chaos because of the gift given to them. Asura crossed his arms and said, it is truly heart-wrenching to see my reincarnation put through such pain. Indra nodded and said, yes, and mine has become so horrible. At least after my defeat I began to mellow out. Kami walked forward and said, all right. I believe we are all in agreement. Everyone looked at the goddess and nodded. Cammy reached out and snapped her fingers. Ashes began to form and rose from the ground. They began to mix together in a small twister before growing bigger and forming a skeleton. After a few more moments, muscle and sinew began to form and then skin. Orange cloth began weaving into existence on the body. In a matter of minutes, Naruto was back and alive. Huh? What the hell? Naruto looked at his hands, shocked to be alive. The next thing Naruto knew, he was enveloped by a powerful hug and being squeezed like crazy. All Naruto could tell was a lot of red color. Oh, Sochi. I missed you so much. Naruto then pushed away from the powerful hug. Despite the woman's bizarre strength, Naruto stepped back away from the duo. Then he saw him, the blonde-haired man behind her. Hi? Minato said awkwardly. Naruto's look became angry. You? The next thing, the dead Kage knew, he was tackled to the ground. Before he could gain his bearings, he found himself being beaten in the face by Naruto furiously. You bastard. Do you have any idea what you put me through? Do you have any idea the suffering I had to endure because of you? Why did you choose me? Why? Kushina managed to pull the boy off her husband. Naruto was now thrashing around in her arms. Minato got up off the ground and said, "Okay, I deserved that." Naruto writhed in Kushina's arms. Tears of anger were running down his cheeks. He stopped and just started crying. Why did you pick me? Naruto asked. The older blonde answered, "Because, you're my son." Naruto froze. There was a brief silence. Kushina let her son go. Minato approached slowly. Naruto then threw out a leg and kicked the man between the legs. Minato let out a cry of pain as he fell to his knees, clutching his injured body. The other guys in the room all winced at the strike to the balls. Kushina then wrapped the blonde around the boy's shoulders and hugged him tightly. Does that mean, you're my mom? Naruto asked. The red-haired Kunoichi smiled and said, Yep, Kushina Uzumaki. The red hot-blooded habanero, and second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Databane. Naruto blinked and laughed and said, Wow. Now I know where I get my verbal tick, Datbeo. The older Uzumaki giggled cutely. As she snuggled Naruto tightly, like she had hoped to do when he was a toddler. She then made the mistake of rubbing Naruto's cheek. Naruto purred. Kushina pulled back in shock as Naruto looked very embarrassed. She was then hugged him, squealing, Cute. Naruto continued to purr in his mother's embrace, though he tried to get out of it, but it was very difficult given Kushina's incredible strength. The three goddesses smiled and Kami said, As much as I hate to break up the touching family moment, we have business to get to. The young ninja looked up at the three women and blushed slightly at how pretty they were. Naruto, Kushina said, May I introduce Kami, Shinigami, and Tozi, the three goddesses, and the Otsutsuki family, the family of the Sage of Six Paths. Naruto looked at his mother, then the three goddesses, and the people who started the ninja world. Not that he knew that last one, of course. Naruto looked at them briefly, brining in their features as he realized that they were not only telling the truth, but he could feel the incredible power coming off them. He could have sworn he heard a voice in his head say, Holy shit, but he pushed that aside. Naruto blinked in shock before finally bowing deeply to the three goddesses. Naruto wasn't that big on manner or tact, but even he knew that you shouldn't mess with divine beings. Kami smiled and said, There is no need to bow before us, Naruto. We have brought you here for a reason. Naruto answered, What? What reason do you have to talk to me about? Kami answered, The world has become a dark and desecrated place. The gift of chakra given by the Sage of Six Paths has been abused over the years. Even the person who was supposed to have the power of the Six Paths has been corrupted. We want you to bring peace to the world. Naruto blinked and said, Peace? What are you talking about? Wait, aren't you three goddesses? Can't you do something? Tozi spoke up and said, Unfortunately, ancient laws passed by creatures older than us prevent us from involving ourselves in the world of mortals. We are, however, able to choose champions to fight for us on the mortal plane. Shinigami nodded and said, Yeah, you are the only one. There is another person from your village who has caught the attention of a few of our siblings. I believe his name was Itachi. Naruto's eyes widened at the name of the Akatsuki member who he had seen before. He flinched slightly as he remembered the cold, emotionless eyes that the Uchiha clan murderer. Are you crazy? Naruto yelled, I may have a grudge against Sasuke, but Itachi. That guy murdered his entire clan on a whim. Why the hell would he do that? Cammy stepped back, surprised at the boy's words. Then she held out her hand. A portal appeared in front of them. Curious, Naruto approached the portal and was surprised to see a conversation between the Sandaime and a younger Itachi. He heard them speak about how the Uchiha clan was planning a coup. How Itachi had been forced to choose to kill them to prevent it. He could see the regret in Itachi's eyes as he was given the order. Afterwards, it showed Itachi being inducted into the Akatsuki. He saw the tears of anger running down his cheeks and his wail of absolute sorrow. Naruto blinked in shock. He had no idea. It also meant that Sasuke wasn't even fighting for the right reason. His thoughts turned dark as his mind went back to Kakashi and Sasuke for what they did to him. Killing him for power, and doing so because of some stupid old grudge. It also made Naruto wonder what would happen if Sasuke ever found out the truth. Naruto was brought out of his thoughts when Cammy spoke. There is more than just that, Naruto, Tozi said. The man you called a grandfather is not the man you knew him to be. Naruto looked at the nature goddess with a confused expression. What do you mean? The old man was always there to help me when I needed it. Cammy waved her hand again and there was another image shown. It showed the old man talking with his advisors, two people whom the blonde knew hated him. They seemed to be talking about how they should have Naruto as a weapon for their village, nothing new to most. What shocked Naruto telling them that he agreed? How he told everyone in the village his status, because he knew that they would react badly to this information. Ordering certain Anbu to make sure Naruto would be caught in certain bad situations, and others to save him. Also he would have a reason to have some connection to the village. If that wasn't enough to hurt Naruto's image of the old leader, the image rewound a few years to show the four meeting again, and planning the downfall of a country called Uzushio. He saw the younger Sarutobi give orders to sabotage the seals protecting the village, and ignore all calls for help. He saw the village fall, with his mother being led to Konoha. The image then began to fast forward showing a younger Naruto having special seals placed on his body that would further cripple him, all provided by the bandaged old advisor, Danzo, if he heard right, only to have the seals be burned off by the Kyuubi's influence. The elder ninja present looked upset at the new information, especially Kushina as displayed by her hair rising and waving around like the tails of a certain giant fox. The Otsutsuki siblings looked upset as well. He was shocked to find out that this was to bring the Kyuubi to Konoha, so they would have a weapon against the other villages. Naruto fell to his knees in shock. His grandfather figure, the man who laughed at his pranks, and welcomed him into his life with open arms, was a fraud. He didn't see him as a monster, but he only saw him as a weapon and a tool. Naruto felt like his world had just shattered. The trio gave Naruto a couple of moments to get his head together. Like we said, the world is corrupt. There are other examples, such as your treatment as a child. The bloodline massacre in Kiri, the abuse of the Biju to create the Jinchuriki and their abuse. We want this to end. We want to bring true peace to the elemental nations. Naruto blinked in shock. What did you mean by bring peace? What do you want me to do? Cammy smiled and said, we will bless you with power from all three of us. We have also found someone to teach you. And I mean really teach you, not like the lazy Cyclops or that perverted hermit. Someone to bring you real power. Naruto blinked in surprise. What do you get in return? Naruto asked. I highly doubt that such a great honor would come without a cost. The three grinned as they looked at each other. Tozi said, simple boy. First, we want you to destroy Konoha. That village has become a corrupt shadow of its former self. Not just the village, but others who believe themselves above the laws of nature and to be gods in human skin. Naruto's thoughts went to Orochimaru when he heard that remark. The goddess of light answered, the world has become a shadow of its former self. Your ancestor, the sage of six paths, gave chakra to the world in hopes that it would help the world. Instead it has led to a war-stricken world. For you to complete this mission Naruto, you must bring peace to the elemental nations. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. He was wondering why they were giving him this mission. Naruto is honored, though was also nervous as this was a very tall order. Naruto was quiet as he thought, which brought slightly concerned looks from those around him. Naruto then pushed aside his doubts. If they believed that he could do it, then he would give it his all. A steely reserve formed in the boy's eyes. So, what do you think of our offer? Shinigami asked. Are you willing to accept the job? Naruto was quiet for a minute. Then he said, yeah, on one condition. I get to wipe out Konoha. It's high time that village got what was coming to it. The three nodded. Kushina and Minato looked at each other. Kushina was happy her son decided to join them and bring down that corrupt village. If not just for his own revenge, but for what they did to his home country and his people. Minato looked upset slightly at his old village, but he quickly squashed the feeling. Kami stepped forward and said, as Kami, I bless you with my power over light. You can heal any wound, physical and mental, revive the dead. She leaned down and kissed his left cheek, causing him to blush and leaving a white lipstick mark. Shinigami stepped forward and said, as Shinigami, I bless you with the power over darkness. You can cause any injury, manipulate the darkness. She leaned down and kissed the boy's right cheek, leaving a purple lipstick mark. Tozi then said, as Tozi, I bless you with the power over nature. You can freely communicate with animals of all kinds, and I give you knowledge of every jutsu on earth. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, leaving a green lipstick mark. The three marks then glowed brightly as they faded. Naruto then felt a huge rush of power run through his body. Naruto groaned in pain before taking a few steps back and rubbed his head. Oh man, the blonde boy said. I feel like I just chugged down a huge barrel of energy drinks. Kushina said, come on now Gaki. We can start your training tomorrow. For now, though, I'd like to catch up with my son and I think you'd like to meet your other teachers. With that, the Uzumaki Namikaze clan members and the Okutsuki clan members began to leave. The three goddesses just stood there and watched. So that's him, huh? The three goddesses turned to see two new figures enter the room. They were a man and woman. The man was rather tall, standing over 6 feet, nearly 7 feet. His body was covered with muscle, showing he was built for both speed and power. His skin was tanned. He wore a black-lined gold vest with a white shirt with a long pair of black pants and combat boots. There were black arm guards on his forearms. The man's eyes were gold and reptilian-like, and on his bared upper arms were patches of what looked like lizard scales. The woman looked incredibly young. She had long, wavy blonde hair that reached down to her feet with a single lock pointed upwards, large green eyes that didn't have an irises, and her build was childlike. She wore a frilly, pink layered robe with a red ribbon tied in a bow around her neck. Around the chest were 3 diamond patterns with 2 blue triangles above. Each of these series were outlined in hot pink. On her head were wing-like adornments around her ears and small hoop earrings. She also lacked shoes. Kami smiled and said, yes, that is the child of prophecy we told you about. The man scoffed and said, the little runt didn't seem like much. The woman elbowed the man in the gut and said, oh, quiet Bahamut. You can see if he is worthy. Give the kid some time to relax and rest. Besides, if I remember correctly, you value family. Isn't that why you called the dragons back in earth and land? Bahamut muttered something under his breath and said, be quiet Mavis. The now identified Mavis giggled and said, so when will he go to my world? I'd like to see his face when he learns about magic. Kami answered, eventually. I want him to gain good control of his powers before he starts learning from you Bahamut, no offense. Bahamut shrugged and said, I understand. My methods can be brutal. With that, the 5 figures began to walk away from each other. Meanwhile, on a large mountain filled with toads, a certain one shifted. The toad was incredibly large, easily eclipsing a building. He was brown-colored with a white belly. He was incredibly wrinkles and his eyes were squinting. He wore a professor's hat with tassels and an orb on top of it. Around its neck was a necklace that had the kanji for oil on it. This was Gamamaru, the great toad sage. There were walls lined with scrolls all around this toad. The toad shifted as he felt something off. He reached out with a webbed hand. He pulled the scroll from the wall and opened it. His squinted eyes widened as he saw the words on the scroll be rewritten. Gamamaru wheezed slightly and said, the prophecy has changed. The village of Konohagakure stood by the gates with bated breath. Some were waiting for the return of Sasuke Uchiha, the last remaining member of one of their strongest clans. Many of the village had been trying to pamper Sasuke so he would see them in a favorable light, and when he rose to the title of clan head he would repay them. Girls were after him because they believed that one day they would marry Sasuke and live the easy life, as they would have a very prominent name. 2 such individuals were Ino Yamanaka and Sakura Haruno, 2 die-hard Sasuke fangirls. There were others who were waiting for Naruto to return. The first was Hinata Hyuga, a girl who had a huge crush on Naruto since the academy. The second was Tsunade Senju, the fifth Hokage and Naruto's godmother. The third was Shizune, Tsunade's assistant. The others waiting for the boy were Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro, who had been called in on the mission as backup. Where are they? Sakura asked. That Baka had better keep his promise. Ino nodded and said, yeah. If he has done anything to Sasuke, I'll tear his mind apart. Off to the side, Hinata gave a soft glare at the two. The two were so focused on Sasuke that they didn't seem to care about anything else. Ino should be seeing her two teammates in the hospital. Instead, she was here worried about her crush. Hinata then felt a small amount of shame run through her. She was just as bad as she couldn't even focus on her own training. Pretty soon people started muttering as they saw Kakashi approaching with Sasuke in his arms. Without Naruto. Get him to the hospital, Kakashi said, as Anbu approached. They took Sasuke and ran to the hospital. Ino and Sakura quickly ran after the Anbu, hoping to see their crush. Tsunade approached Kakashi, a frightened expression on her face. Kakashi, where is Naruto? Tsunade asked. Where is he, damn it? Kakashi, harnessing his acting skills, said, I'm sorry Tsunade-sama, but I didn't reach them in time. Sasuke had driven Naruto through with a Chidori. Naruto was dead when I got to them. The busty cage gained a panicked expression as she said, no, it can't be. To drive the point home, Kakashi pulled out the scroll with Naruto's body in it. Tsunade took the scroll with trembling hands. She knew these kinds of scrolls all too well. She knew that these were used in times of war to ship the dead back home, to prevent secrets from being found, or for the dead being desecrated. The blonde closed her eyes as tears began to form. Tsunade found herself clencing her fist as she remembered the deaths of Dan and Nawaki, both killed by the curse of her necklace. At that moment she turned and left, heading for the cage tower in the middle of the village. Shizune quickly ran after her teacher, hoping to comfort her. Hinata was taking it as badly as Tsunade. She proceeded to go home so no one would have to see her cry. Other villagers began acting more jovial when they learned that Sasuke had killed Naruto. Finally, the demon they had all despised was dead. They no longer had to fear the retribution of the Kyuubi. They all began to vocalize their joy. Gaara and his siblings felt disgust and sorrow build up. Sorrow for the loss of the boy who had helped to make their damaged family whole again, after their father turned Gaara into a virtually emotionless fighting machine. Anger at the villagers for their disregard for the death of someone, over something that they had no control over. Beyond that was disgust towards these people for celebrating the return of a traitor. Had it been their village, Sasuke would have dragged Sasuke back in chains and then had him tried for what he did. However, it seemed that they didn't seem to care. The trio of Sand Ninja began to leave, heading back home. They would make sure that the Wind Daimyo would know of how their so-called ally treated their own. Meanwhile on Mount Myoboku, what do you mean the prophecy has changed? The shout came from Jiraiya, the Toad Sage. Echoed throughout the chamber. Gamamaru was in. Yes, the great Toad Sage said, the prophecy has changed. It doesn't refer to a child anymore. Now it refers the spawn of a dragon who will bring peace or destruction of the world. It says that with the power of the heavens and with golden fire he will eviscerate all evil with the help of the 9 keys. Jiraiya looked confused at this. What the hell did this prophecy mean? Why do prophecies always have to be so damn cryptic? He didn't know what the heavens meant. Could it mean the Sage of 6 Paths, or something else? The gold fire was probably a bloodline, or some ability he had. As for the 9 keys, he immediately thought about the tailed beasts. He idly wondered what this would mean for Naruto. Jiraiya, the white-haired super pervert, turned to see a toad that far eclipsed his own size, but not as big as Gamamaru. The toad was orange with blue markings. Bandages were wrapped around his body and left foreleg. He had a necklace with 7 large beads on with the central and largest one had the kanji for loyalty on it. It was Gamma, the holder of the toad summoning contract. What is it, Gamma? What's got your armor in a wad? Jiraiya asked, confused. Instead of answering, the toad took out the summoning scroll. He laid it down and opened it. Jiraiya looked down at the opened scrolls. He was curious, and when he caught sight of Naruto's name, The name that was normally written in red blood had turned black, signifying Naruto's death. "Oh no," Jiraiya said. "I have to go. Gamamaru, tell Ma and Patode I say hi." With that, Jiraiya vanished in a plume of smoke. Moments later in Konoha, Jiraiya appeared in a large blast of smoke. He was treated to the sight of Tsunade chugging down a huge bottle of sake. While this did result in his favorite parts of her moving in a nice fashion, he also knew that Tsunade only drank like this when she was grieving, as he saw her do it when Dan and Nawaki died. "Tsunade," Jiraiya said, getting the woman's attention, "is it true? Is Naruto really gone?" Tears spilled down the woman's face, and that was the only answer that the old pervert needed. Jiraiya swept her up in a hug and held her tight, hoping to comfort his oldest friend. "Why?" she asked. "Why does that damn thing keep taking everybody away from me?" Tsunade sobbed as he continued to hug Jiraiya. She was also trying to keep aware of where his hands were. Luckily, they stayed on her back. "It's okay, Haim," Jiraiya whispered, "let it out." Let it all out, she did. All the pain she had bottled up over her brother, Nawaki, her lover, Dan, and now her godson, Naruto. Tsunade sobbed into her fellow Sanin's shoulder. "This is all my fault," Tsunade sobbed. "I shouldn't have left. I was so upset over Kushina. I didn't even think of coming back." Jiraiya said, "It's my fault too. I should have checked on Naruto when I came to give Sarutobi-sensei my updates. I should have been a better godfather. Now I know when I die, Kushina, Minato, and probably Naruto are going to kick my ass into reincarnation." Despite her upset nature, Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle. The image of the three family members beating the living the tar of the old pervert brought her spirits up some. The pair backed off from each other. There was a brief silence. "I'm leaving." Jiraiya turned to Tsunade with a shocked expression. "What?" The busty blonde sighed and said, "I'm leaving. I don't have anything tying me to this village anymore. I'll just use my Sanin travel rights, and there's nothing those old farts or that old freak Danzo can do to stop me from leaving." Jiraiya said, "I take it that there is more to this than just Naruto dying." She turned to the window and said, "Ever since the news of Naruto's death, these idiots have been celebrating. This is not the village that my grandfather founded. I can just see him and my grand-uncle rolling over in their graves so much that they wear through the wood in their coffins." Jiraiya nodded and said, "Good luck with that, Tsunade. You know how the council will feel about a skilled shinobi like yourself leaving." Tsunade scoffed and said, "I'd like to see them try. Like I said, they can't do anything thanks to my rights." Meanwhile, in Konoha's hospital, the Konoha 12, minus Sakura, Ino, and Sasuke were gathered in Choji's hospital room. "Naruto's dead?" Choji asked from his hospital bed. The overweight ninja was hooked up to a heart monitor and a couple of IVs. He tried to move, but his muscles screamed in agony due to the red soldier pill he ate. "It's hard to believe," Kiba said. Wearing bandages on his body as well as his arm in a sling. "He may have been a baka, but hell if he was a tough baka. To be honest, I always had a feeling that Naruto would outlive us. The guy was so too stubborn to die." Kiba had been forced to acknowledge Naruto's growth into a shinobi after the way he defeated him and Neji. His thoughts shifted to Akamaru, who was currently at his family's veterinary clinic. Neji just sat off to the side. Thick bandages wrapped around his shoulder where an arrow had pierced his shoulder and stitches on his back where several kunai had pierced his back. His uninjured arm was clenched as he tried to keep himself from getting too angry. "Troublesome," Shikimaru muttered as he glanced down at his broken finger, the only injury he sustained during this mission. The others all seemed upset. They may not have held Naruto in high regard, but they couldn't deny that it was upsetting. Lee felt tears run down his face as he felt anger run through his body. The most youthful Naruto had fallen in battle, bringing back the traitor. He swore that he would live on in his friend's name, in the name of the boy who helped save his ninja career. Suddenly, the door opened and a member of Enbu wearing a wolf mask entered the room. He looked at the members of the room and said, "For those who are not part of the Uchiha retrieval mission, please leave. We need to talk to the members of the team." In another room, Sakura and Ino sat while Sasuke laid in a bed, waiting for him to wake up. Sasuke had immediately been rushed to a hospital room to examine his wounds. Thankfully, to the fangirls anyway, he only had a few broken bones, minor lacerations, and was suffering from some minor chakra exhaustion. While it seemed that the room was vacant other than the damn, Ino said, Naruto really did a number on him. Sakura scoffed and said, Naruto just got lucky. There's no way the dead last of our class could have beaten Sasuke. Ino nodded and said, yeah, you're right. I'm going to get something to drink. You want something? Sakura answered, water, please. The Yamanaka heiress walked out the room, closing the door behind her. There was a moment of silence. You're so pathetic. A voice rang in Sakura's head. Sakura sighed and thought, I thought I got rid of you. What do you want? Inner Sakura, a second personality that Sakura had, called as for short, said, why are you even doing this? You're sitting beside the guy who tried to betray your village after your other teammate died. Are you really that shallow? Sakura thought back, I don't have to take this from you. Is responded, well, you got me sister, too bad, so sad. Honestly, I thought that the whole mission to Wave Country would have been enough to knock you off your high horse, but apparently, you're too cocky to think that you can't be taken down. Sakura retorted, oh please. I was the Kunoichi of the year and Sasuke was the rookie of the year. We are meant to be. He almost kissed me that one time, and we probably would be dating now if Naruto hadn't kept getting the way by constantly asking me out. Is answered, yeah. And the fact that Sasuke seemed to be acting a little out of the ordinary completely slipped your notice, Ms. Kunoichi of the Year. And we both know that you only got that title because of your book smarts, which has gotten you nothing. Sakura was about to argue with her, but has cut her off, and before you start going on about what you've done, let's recap. During the bell test, all you did was run through the forest and fainted when you saw an illusion and when you saw Sasuke buried up to his neck in the dirt. During the wave mission, you just stood by and guarded the bridge builder. If it were for Kakashi, Sasuke, and Naruto, you probably would have been cut in half by Zabuza and his helper. Sakura tried again, but has refused to let her get a word in. In the Forest of Death, you had to be saved by Rock Lee, Ino, Choji, and Shikamaru. True, you stepped up, but you still had to be saved. You didn't make it to the finals while Naruto and Sasuke did. Then when Gaara attacked you just wound up playing innocent bystander. Now that you think that you've had training from Tsunade that you're actually better? Sakura growled out, forgetting to speak mentally, I am better. Is laughed and said, really, because you haven't really done anything except help at the last second, get saved and pretty much nothing else. Just face it Pinky, you're the deadweight of the team, not Naruto. As for Sasuke, he hasn't even given you so much as a glance, or any girl for that matter. Wake the hell up. With that is went quiet. Sakura growled in anger as he glanced at Sasuke's still sleeping form. She growled as she pushed down her doubts and anger as she focused on the task at hand. At that moment, Ino walked back in with the water, which Sakura took with a small, thanks, and drank. It will all work out, Sakura thought, looking at Sasuke with an icy pit forming in her stomach. Despite her willing it away, everything will all work out. Meanwhile in the Hyuga complex, since she arrived home, Hinata had been crying in her room on her own. She heard several branch members trying to coax her out of her room, but she told them to leave, in her usual polite manner, and just wanted to be left alone. Hinata sobbed into her pillow. The boy who could inspire her was gone. The boy she had crushed on for years was gone. She looked back and cursed herself for her weakness. She always watched from afar and never really approached him, her nerves always getting the best of her. Hinata got up from her bed and walked over to the mirror. She saw herself. She saw the sorrow-filled eyes. Her tear-stained cheeks flushed from the amount of time she had spent crying. She glanced at the nearby mirror which sat on a dresser. Near it was a picture of her as a toddler, smiling happily, next to her mother, holding the recently born Hanabi, and her father, with a true smile on his face as opposed to the constant serious scowl he usually wore. Ka-chan. Hinata thought, why did you have to go? Father and Hanabi both treat me so coldly. And now this. Is everything I know going to be taken from me? Hinata's eyes became strong as she thought, no, I won't fall into despair. For you, for Naruto-kun, I will become stronger, for him and for you. I've already started working on my own version of the gentle fist. Maybe I can talk to Gai-sensei and Lee about it. Given that they've trained Neji, they might be able to help me. A look of determination that almost rivaled Naruto's filled the child's white eyes as she left the room to find the two members of Team 9. If she was looking at the image of her mother on the picture, she probably would have seen her mother's smile grow slightly. Meanwhile in Omegakure, several figures stood around a large statue. There were 8 of them, all of them wearing black cloaks that had red clouds on them. The first was a male with onyx eyes that had long, pronounced tiered troughs. His hair was jet black and was pulled in a low ponytail, and his face was framed with center-parted bangs that extended to his chin. The cloak he wore had a high collar. Under the cloak he wore mesh armor with navy accents under an identical t-shirt with a simple white belt around the waist and dark blue pants. On his right ring finger was a red ring with the kanji symbol for vermilion on it. Around his neck was a necklace that had 3 silver rings with red gems in them. On his hands you could see black nail polish as well as black nail polish on his toes. On his forehead was a Konoha headband with a slash mark through the symbol. This was Itachi Uchiha S-rank missing nin from Konohagakure and slayer of the Uchiha clan. The man next to him was by far the tallest, and he looked kind of strange. His skin was pale blue-gray with small round, white eyes, gill-like facial marking under his eyes, giving him a shark-like appearance. If you could see under his attire you'd see actual gills on his shoulders. His teeth were sharp and triangular. His hair was dark blue and spiked up in the shape of a shark fin. On his fingers and toes were dark purple nail polish. There also a sash going around his body holding what looked like a club covered in bandages with a long light yellow handle with a small skull adorning the bottom of it. On his left ring finger was a yellow ring with the kanji for south. On his forehead was a Kirigakure headband with a slash through the symbol. This was Kisame Hoshigaki, a former member of Kirigakure's 7 swordsmen and monster of the Hidden Mist. Next to him was a medium-length silver hair that was slicked back and distinct purple eyes. He wore the black cloak with red clouds like the others. Under the cloak he wore pants and sandals. Around his neck was the headband symbol of Yugakure with a slash mark through it. He also had an amulet that had a symbol that looked like an inverted triangle in a circle. On his back was a large triple-bladed scythe with red blades that got smaller from top to bottom, a red shaft with bandages wrapped around the bottom of the long handle, a black cable that connected to the man's arm, going up his cloak sleeve. On his fingers and toes were dark green nail polish, and on his left index finger was an orange ring that had the kanji for 3 in it. This was Hidan the Jashin priest. Next to him was the second tallest of those tan-skinned, and he looked like a man in his prime given his muscular build. He wore a white hood and a black ask, leaving his green pupils and red sclera eyes, wore the black and red cloak and a headband for Takigakure on his forehead with a slash through the symbol. On his fingers and toes he wore dark brown nail polish, and on his left middle finger was a dark green ring with a kanji symbol for north in it. This was Kakuzu. Next to him was a rather feminine-looking man, if his long blonde hair was anything to go by. He had slanted blue eyes, and his long blonde hair was in a half ponytail with the rest hanging down freely, with a bang hanging over his left eye. If you could see under that bang you'd see a scope. If you could see the palms of his hands you would see mouths on them. He wore the normal cloak. Under that cloak he wore a belt that had various bags of clay. He wore black nail polish on his fingers and toes, and on his right index finger was a teal ring that had the kanji for blue or green in it. This was Deidara, the Mad Bomber. The next figure was by far the shortest of them. He was hunched over with pale skin and a black mask. He wore a straw hat on his head with strips of white cloth covering his face. Unlike the others he didn't wear nail polish or a ring. This was Sasori of the Red Sand. Next was the only woman of the group. She stood relatively tall with blue hair, amber-colored eyes with lavender eyeshadow, and a labrae piercing. In her hair she had a light blue paper flower and a neutral expression on her face. She wore the black cloak like the others and orange nail polish plus the ring on her right middle finger with the kanji for white on it. This was Conan. Next to her was by far the strangest of the bunch. One half of him was completely black with a gold eye, while the other half was white with light green hair and a golden eye. Around his head was a large plant-like mouth like a Venus flytrap. This was Zetsu, species unknown. The final member seemed to be their leader. He was of a respectable height. He had multiple piercings in his ears, nose, and lower lips. He wore the traditional cloak, a strange necklace around his neck, and on his right thumb was a purplish-gray ring with the kanji for 0 in it. He also had a necklace around his neck. What stuck out about him was his hair and eyes. His hair was orange and spiky. His eyes were purple with a black dot pupil and a ring pattern around it. This was Pain. Together they were Akatsuki, an organization of missing nin. So the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki is dead, Pain said, his emotionless face. Kisame let out an annoyed huff and said, damn, I hoping to get that kid. I wanted to go up against Konoha's odd beast. Itachi just let out a huff. Looks like that little brother of yours is more of Pain than we thought, Itachi. Yee, Deidara said. Itachi just gave the mad bomber his usual poker face. Deidara was about to say something else when he was suddenly slapped over the head. A large metal scorpion tail slid back under Sasori's cloak faster than most could perceive, but they still saw it. Enough, Pain said. Though his voice didn't hold anger, the power behind it caused everything to stop. It seems our plans are at an end, Pain said. Leader Sama, that might not be the case, Zetsu said, speaking in two tones, as he stepped forward. The leader of Akatsuki turned towards the plant man. We all know the Biju cannot be killed. We just need to wait until the Nine Tails reforms in a couple of years, the humanoid plant explained. Kisame groaned and said, do we really need to wait 9 more years? This is crap. A small wave of killing intent from Pain shut the man up. Pain's purple and black ringed eyes held a small amount of annoyance and said, fine. Our plan will continue, but delayed. All members of Akatsuki then proceeded to vanish, revealing them to be nothing but holograms. Everyone except for Conan and Pain. After a brief silence, the amber-eyed woman said, this was an unexpected happening. Pain turned to her and said, plans have delays or unexpected issues, Conan. Even God has plans that lasted for centuries before they were complete. Pain then proceeded to walk into the darkness. Conan quickly followed. Meanwhile, with Naruto, Kushina and Minato had fallen over laughing loudly. You mean, Kushina said as she gasped for air, you painted the Hokage monument in a kill me orange jumpsuit and nobody noticed? Naruto smiled at this and laughed, yep. The only person who caught me was Iruka-sensei. I still don't know how he did that. The two then fell over laughing again. Oh man, I would have loved to see that, Minato chuckled, tears running down his face. Off to the side, the Otsutsuki clan members were laughing maniacally. They had to admit it was hilarious. Kami, Tozi, and Shinigami all chuckled as they remembered the incident. Being all-knowing had its advantages sometimes. It had been about an hour since Naruto arrived. Since then they had arrived at the place where they were staying. It was a rather nicely sized manor. There were a few rooms upstairs with enough room for the Namikaze family and the Outsuki family. In the back there was a huge training area, no doubt where Naruto would be spending his time training. Since then Minato and Kushina were both bonding with their son. It was quite clear that Naruto still held some resentment to Minato, but they could work on that later. They had asked Naruto about what his adventures as a ninja. From the wave mission to the Chunin exams, the two parents couldn't help but feel pride at how their son had managed to help so many people. They were annoyed, however, when they learned about some of the other ninja of Konoha. Minato was even more disappointed in Kakashi. The young boy apparently had let that damn Sharingan eye of his go to his head, given the over 1,000 jutsu thing. Minato shook his head as this was not the boy who he trained. The amount of favoritism shown was disgusting. Hell, it was the very same treatment that led to Orochimaru. Kushina was thinking more along the lines of beating the tar out of the silver-haired hypocrite. Another thing that got them was how much the academy had degraded. They were popping arrogant pains left and right. One image was the idea of Kiba Inuzuka. The boy's brash attitude and almost near inability to hold his tongue would lead to troubles for his team if it wasn't taken down. Hopefully Naruto's embarrassing defeat of him brought down his ego some. They were also appalled at the fangirls being produced in the form of Ino and Sakura. Two girls who dieted and didn't take any of their training serious unless it involved their crush. It made them wonder how they had survived so long. They also regaled Naruto with tales of their youth, telling him about their times in the academy and what they had done when they were his age, as well as a few war stories from the ninja wars. Naruto learned he got his verbal tick from his mother and, apparently, got this dad's taste in women. That being women with unique features. This made a lot of sense given his crush on Sakura. The partying mood went down after a while, and Naruto decided it was a good time to move on to a serious subject. So, Naruto said, I've been going through this, but can't figure it out. How exactly am I supposed to bring peace to the world? The feeling around the table became serious. First of all, Hagoromo said, we need to approach the major issues. First, you are going to have to take the remaining Biju from the elemental nations. The Biju have been abused throughout history because of their power, and I will not see that happen again. The second will be the destruction of the Leaf Village, and finally the destruction of the Akatsuki. Naruto blinked and said, so the Akatsuki have to go, huh? What about Itachi? Indra answered, don't worry Naruto, Itachi will be saved. As for uniting the ninja world, I have a feeling someone may cause it unintentionally. Kushina then said, now, it's starting to get really late. We should get to sleep. We start training early in the morning. Everyone nodded and got up and went to bed. Naruto had changed into some pajamas and was prepared to sleep. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt like he didn't have to sleep with one eye open. The following morning, Naruto struggled to stay asleep as light flowed in from the windows. He groaned a bit as he tried to stay asleep. It was the first time in his life that he was able to sleep peacefully, and damn if he wasn't going to enjoy it. Naruto rolled over in his sleep and snugged deeper into his pillows and almost went back to sleep. I say almost because a hand pushed his shoulder. Naruto, Kushina said as he pushed her son slightly, time to wake up. Naruto simply grumbled and pushed himself deeper into the bed, pulling the covers over his head. Kushina pulled the covers off, starting to get slightly annoyed. With her son refusing to rise from the world of dreams, Kushina then decided it was time to bring out the big guns. She left the room and returned a few moments later with a bucket of cold water in her hands. She drew it back and launched HTE contents at E-boy. Naruto let out a shrill cry as the ice-cold water struck him, instantly arousing him from his sleep. What the hell, woman? Naruto, now cold and soaking. Kushina said, that's what you get for not waking up when I told you to. Now get dried off and come down for breakfast. We have some things we need to discuss. Naruto sighed and nodded. Naruto got up and changed out of his wet clothes. After a large breakfast that was made up of bacon, eggs, waffles, apples, milk, and orange juice, Naruto was given his schedule for the training he would receive. 7:00 to 7:30 breakfast, 7:30 to 8 o'clock morning workout, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock chakra control exercises. 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock taijutsu training, 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock genjutsu training, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock lunch, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock ninjutsu training, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock fuinjutsu practice, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock dinner, 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock relaxation, 10 o'clock bedtime. After looking over his schedule, Naruto felt a little nervous. That was a very long schedule, but knowing what his mission is supposed to be, he knew it was going to be a very long few years. He sighed to himself as he finished his breakfast. 7:30 to 8 o'clock morning workout. Naruto now stood in front of his mother. She crossed her arms as she looked across from the boy. Okay, Naruto, the redhead said, we are going to work on your body. This will work you up enough for the rest of the training for the day. Naruto nodded in understanding. Now, Kushina said, drop and give me 50 push-ups, 50 crunches, 50 squats, and then run 5 laps around this training area. Naruto didn't move as he just stared at his mother with a shocked expression. Kushina narrowed her eyes and yelled, did his stutter? Move. Her eyes flashed red and her hair raged like an octopus tentacles. Naruto immediately dropped to the ground and started exercising. Shikimaru and Kiba were right. Moms really are scary. 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Kushina stood in front of her now exhausted child. The blonde was now doubled over and breathing very hard. Don't tell you're tired already, Kushina said, we've just gotten started. Naruto panted, slightly tired because of the exhaustion of the warm-up that he had gotten. Now then, the woman continued, from what you told me you know chakra control up to the water walking exercise, correct? Naruto nodded. Well, then we are going to improving on your normal chakra control, Kushina said as she motioned to the trees nearby. You see these trees? You are going to climb up them via the walking exercise. Naruto frowned and said, seriously mom? I can already do that. Kushina grinned and said, yes, but this is going to be different. Each tree is of a different density. One eye rotting and other such different factors. If you ever touch the ground at the end of the training you will have to do that amount times 10 in push-ups. Naruto grinned and said, sounds easy enough. Naruto walked up a tree. He stood there for a moment before jumping to another tree. He held that for a moment before he realized his foot almost broke through the second tree's rotting bark. "Oh, and one more thing, Naruto," Kushina said as she looked up at her son. "Dodge." Naruto looked confused for a moment and asked, "Dodge? Dodge?" Kushina then released a barrage of kunai. Naruto let out a cry of terror as he started dodging like crazy, trying to avoid the waves of weapons trying to pierce his skin. In the process of dodging, he didn't apply the right amount of chakra and slipped off the surface of a tree, falling to the ground. Naruto gave his mother a dirty look. "Don't give me that look, young man," she said sternly, causing the blonde to wince. The rest of the first hour continued like this. After an hour, Naruto had to do 100 push-ups from the tree exercise. After the hour, they changed things up, going with the water walking exercise using a pool that formed in the ground. This time Naruto had to walk on water while the water was swirling. Naruto had some trouble with this, but he managed to get it done quickly. Unfortunately, the method didn't work long as the water would speed up and slow down at random intervals, and Kushina was still throwing stuff at him. By the time the second hour was over, Naruto was exhausted. Thankfully, Minato was the one who took over his training next. 10:00 to 11 o'clock. Taijutsu training. Minato stood across from Naruto with his arms crossed. Naruto looked slightly winded as this training was far more intense than what he was used. "Okay," the older blonde said. "Naruto, I want you to attack me. Let's see just what you can do." Naruto nodded and charged. Minato dodged an overextended punch with ease. After a few minutes, Minato managed to get a feel for his son's style, if you could call it that. Naruto was more of a brawler than anything else. He used shadow clones haphazardly, only something an Uzumaki could do, to mob his opponent. While a good strategy, this could be a problem as the clones could get in each other's way if there were too many. Though he found that Naruto could think on his feet when he was duped by Naruto switching with a clone and a windmill shuriken flying at his head. "Okay, Naruto," the older blonde said with a smile, "I know your way of fighting, but it's time for you to learn how to really fight. This brawler style you use isn't going to cut it. So, follow me and do as I do." Naruto and Minato both got into a particular stance and they both started practicing. They went for the full hour before it was time to move on. 11:00 to 12 o'clock. Genjutsu training. Naruto now stood in front of Indra. The first user of the Sharingan stood across from Naruto. "Okay, Naruto," the oldest son of Hagoromo said. "What do you know about Genjutsu?" Naruto answered, "Mostly the basics." Indra raised an eyebrow and his Sharingan flashed for a brief moment. Naruto's eyes became blank and then the blonde fell over unconscious. Indra sighed as he walked over to the prone boy and smacked him over the head. "Huh, who, what it in the where?" Indra sighed and said, "This is going to take a while." 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock lunch. Naruto's stomach made a loud grumbling noise as he and the others all sat down around the table. There was a huge lunch filled with various foods, including ramen. After eating and getting a good amount of time digesting, everyone went back to work. 1:00 to 2 o'clock. Ninjutsu training. Ashura stood across from Naruto as he stood up ready for training. "So, Naruto, what do you know about jutsu?" Naruto thought for a moment and answered that it is the art of molding chakra through hand signs to launch attacks of various size, defend against other jutsu, enhance yourself, and other such effects. Ashura nodded and said, "Correct." "Now what are the major affinities?" Naruto gained a confused look. "Affinities?" Ashura rolled his eyes and mentally cursed the idiots in the academy before he said, "Naruto, chakra affinities are the element a person's chakra is aligned to. This means they are more likely to use that kind of jutsu." Naruto thought for a minute and asked, "So a person like Zabuza would have a water affinity while someone like Sasuke would have fire and lightning?" Ashura nodded and said, "Correct." Naruto then asked, "So the main affinities would be fire, water, earth, wind, and lightning, right?" Ashura nodded and said, "Yes, but there are two more affinities than just those." Naruto blinked and started asked, "What?" "There are?" Ashura nodded and said, "There are. The other two main affinities are yin, which can be used to create anything from nothing, and yang, which can be used to give life. There are also sub-affinities which are normally seen as bloodlines that are two or more chakra natures mixed into one. An example being the first Hokage's wood release, which was a mix of earth and water chakra." Naruto listened in awe and then stopped for a moment when he realized something. Wait, I met someone a while back named Haku who could use ice techniques. Can that be made from mixing chakra affinities? Ashura nodded and said, yes, ice can be made by mixing water and wind chakra. Naruto blinked in surprise and said, so that means that all the elements can be mixed together. That's a lot of jutsu combinations. The founder of the Senju clan smiled and said, yes, there are. Now on to training Naruto. I want you to perform the fireball jutsu. Naruto blinked in confusion and asked, what, why? Ashura said, don't question your instructor. Naruto stepped away from his teacher and started to think about what he knew on the jutsu. He found it and went through the necessary hand signs. Fire release. Grand fireball. Instead of a large ball of fire, Naruto only launched a couple of sparks from his mouth. Ah, what? I did it right. Ashura stepped forward and said, Naruto, while you may have some knowledge of the technique, you do not know its mechanics. Think of it like you've copied the jutsu with the Sharingan. Without knowledge of its mechanics you can't use it. Naruto sighed, slightly upset. Some of the jutsu he had seen used in his life were cool. However, the Otsutsuki clan member said, you do have an affinity for wind chakra. We shall start with that. For the remaining time, Naruto was trying to learn how to cut a leaf with his chakra. It was difficult as Naruto's control was still shot to hell after only one day of training. 2:00 to 4 o'clock Fuinjutsu practice. Naruto now sat at a desk with an inkwell, a pen, and a few dozen pieces of paper. Hagoromo and Minato stood behind him. Now, Naruto, Minato started. Fuinjutsu is far more complicated than it sounds. For fully utilize a seal, it must be perfect. If even one mark on the seal is out of place, the seal could fail in a spectacular fashion. Naruto blinked and said, it couldn't be that bad. Hagoromo approached the child and said, Naruto, if I had been faulty in the seal I used to seal away the chakra of the Kyuubi, the power would have torn me apart long before I died and it would have gone on a rampage. Plus, if the seal on you was done even slightly wrong, you would have wound up like your friend Gaara. Naruto winced as he remembered how Gaara had been before his defeat. With that, Naruto started to get to work. Unfortunately, Naruto had difficulty because his handwriting was horrible. Again, damn the academy, or just lack of general education. Before Naruto could learn any Fuinjutsu he would have to improve his handwriting until it was legible. 4:00 to 5 o'clock dinner. Naruto was exhausted, both physically and mentally by the time dinner came around. After eating his fill, he and his teachers began to discuss any changes that they would make to Naruto's training over time. 5:00 to 10 o'clock relaxation. Naruto spent the rest of the day relaxing up until bedtime. The blonde hit the bed falling asleep before he hit the pillow. Thanks for watching, guys.